Hello and welcome to another episode of 28 Days of Blackness. Today we have the privilege of having with us Pamela Johnson, and she'll be talking about Gloria Richardson. Pam, let's get right into it. Can you give us a little bit of her backstory?
Absolutely, and before I do that, I just want to say that I'm also honored to speak about this queen because she's someone who I did not know about in Black history. And so I was educated to learn about her and her plight and what she had to contribute to Black excellence and just the movement in general. So let's just get into it. Miss Queen Gloria Richardson was born in Baltimore, Maryland, later relocated to Cambridge, Maryland. Her grandfather was very affluent. He was a member of the city council, and back in those days you didn't have many Black folks who were members of local government to basically speak for us. Like I said, they relocated to Cambridge, and her grandfather owned like many storefronts in the Second Ward, which was predominantly African American. So he was kind of dignified as like a community leader and a businessman, and just someone who the community could relate to, even if they didn't have as much as he had. Gloria Richardson, she went to Howard University at just 16 years old. We do have kids going to college very early today, but back in those days, like, that was definitely an honor. And after graduating from Howard, came back into her community and wanted to make a difference. And she graduated with a BA in sociology. She worked in Washington, D.C. for some time after graduating from Howard. And, the hardship of being an African American, she really realized that she could not maneuver herself, even though she came from an affluent family, and wanting to work in social services to help Black people and people in general. But see, the thing is that assistance in a community where it came from a Black woman had to be given to only Black-only clients.
Oh, wow. And that's a lot to actually take in when we actually start to think about that, and you brought up the fact that she came from a very well-to-do family.
Yeah.
And, she went to, one of the best HBCUs as well. And then still, it did not, stop her from, facing some kind of racial adversity. Yes. How did that affect her?
She was told, like, even applying for the position, that the position had already been filled, and even though it had not. And I think that made her the woman who she is today, because she's still with us here in the flesh. And I think that made her the strong and brazen and diligent and resilient woman that she was. And is. She disapproved or kind of like went back and forth as far as Dr. King's preaching of nonviolence and the nonviolence in general. And not that she was a violent woman, but she was a no-nonsense woman.
And we can definitely understand, and maybe, her grandfather definitely had something to do with that.
Yes.
So, let's get right into it. What was her impact? What change was she ushering in?
Absolutely. So, she was definitely no nonsense. She was definitely unconventional when it came to, back in the days, there were a lot of nonviolent teachings and preachings that were going on, but she was definitely no nonsense and very brazen and very resilient about what she was going to do. So when the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee reached out to local activists, and Gloria was one of them, and her daughter Donna, who was a college student at the time, they offered their assistance, and the city of Cambridge was adamantly against the presence of both civil rights organizations, arguing that Cambridge was already desegregated, right? Although this couldn't be further from the truth, but you know how that goes. So SNCC, they held many sit-ins and many protests and rallies, and with theaters and diners that did not allow Black folks to occupy that establishment.
Oh, wow. So literally they're going in places where they're on one side there's making the argument that it's diversified and there's no racism, and on the other side then there's that whole, why are you in this establishment?
Absolutely.
You don't belong here.
Absolutely.
What are the repercussions to actually protesting, fighting for civil liberties and rights?
Well, Well, definitely. I mean, repercussions are incarceration, arrest, being taken from your family, being held, and not so often having the dignity or respect that's given to you, that's deserved by you as a human being, right? So those are inalienable rights. Later, in 1962, Gloria saw that things weren't quite moving the way they should be moving, so she founded her own organization, Cambridge Nonviolence Action Committee. And that was a committee, they, had very explosive confrontations, right? They weren't scared to really get involved in what was going on as far as racist encounters and protesters. And in the Civil War on race, right in the streets of Cambridge, the Civil Rights Movement in Cambridge, Maryland, it was just something that was very strong and very focused and very tense at the time, but it was something that was needed to not only see us as nonviolent actors, but to also see us as strong-willed people who will stand up for our folks no matter what.
So, and I like that, and it sounds like she has a lot of bite.
Yeah.
And that she's definitely 100%
Absolutely.
for peaceful protest, but at the same time,
if it get down to it, let's get down to it.
Okay, now.
I mean, she was a critic of Dr. King's nonviolent teachings, but still had respect for the man and what he did for the movement and our people. Still, their beliefs in having to deal with the confrontation of folks coming at you with guns and water hoses and dogs, that will definitely turn folks into an ever, like, I don't want to be violent, but know that I can and I will be. I am anti-violence, but I understand why folks get violent. The disrespect and just the dismissive nature of how our people have been treated. And Gloria definitely said enough is enough.
Oh, and I definitely can understand that. And some would even argue, as popular as the nonviolent movement was, it could not have been as popular during that time without the threat of violence.
Yes, absolutely not. People have to know that there are consequences if you continue to give us and treat us like we don't matter. People have to understand that we are just people in itself. We are human beings who have emotions, who have different type of things going on inside. We have to deal with this and then have to come out in society who no longer accepts us and never really did accept us. And so that's the problem even back in those days in the 60s and even what's going on in 2019. We're still being disrespected. And so I say enough is enough, and I was glad to learn about Gloria Richardson and what she did for the movement and what she continues to do. She just appeared on CNN not too long ago. So she's still with us and still fighting hard and still, moving mountains and shaking things up. So I'm all with Miss Richardson.
Oh, and I love it. And I just didn't want to distract. But earlier we talked about, the penalties of being arrested for standing up and standing out.
Absolutely.
And it just brings me, just briefly to the whole Sandra Bland.
Oh, yeah.
And her standing up for herself. She was like Miss Richardson.
That's right.
And speaking her own truth. And we saw how that, tragically ended.
Absolutely.
Despite that, though, would you still, encourage, people to stand up for themselves?
Yes, I do. Every day I encourage our youth, young adults, and anyone in my community that you are your first person, like you are the person to really make sure that you're fighting for yourself. You are the first line of the confrontation, and you're also the first line of how things play out. And you have the right to defend yourself if it gets down to it. Like I said, I am nonviolent, but I understand when people are pushed, literally pushed with hands and shoved and pushed to the limits, how things can get out of line. And I think that if everyone, white, black, and any color, demand equal service and opportunity and treatment of everyone, no matter what color they are, then we'll have the assistance of others and they'll understand our plight as African Americans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I definitely love that, and I think that that's a very, very important piece of information. But hate to turn the tables around, Pam. You do a lot in our community as well. How does the story of Gloria Richardson actually, encourage you or help you to do what you do for our great city?
She actually encouraged me a lot because I was reading her story And it reminded me about things that happened in my life, you know, standing up and fighting for people and fighting for their fair treatment as well as my own. It reminds me how people will try to assassinate your character because what you're saying is right and how you're moving for others is right, but they're scared of that. So Gloria is a threat, okay? And I know I'm definitely a threat to some folks who want to keep things the same, but at the same token, I can't stay in a position where I have a voice and people listen to me and I'm not speaking, you know, power into what's going on in my community. So I definitely make sure that I stand up, and her story just like it kind of reignited a spirit in me to never stop and never let anyone silence my voice no matter what.
That is awesome. And I'm so happy that you're able to see the correlation between the two of you. It was a part of our selection when we chose her for you.
Thank you.
So definitely, I'm going to have to ask you to leave us with a quote, a saying, a motto, something that can push us into the very next episode. Can you give us something?
Yeah, so you guys did the Royal Men, and I think it was Women's History Month. You were highlighting women. And I don't remember my exact quote, but I'll try to, because it was my own quote. And basically it was, you know, working in the community, you know, we can do three things. So you can either get involved in what's going on, or you can stay the way you are and do nothing, or you can get the hell out the way. So either help and don't hurt, stay complacent as you are, or move and let us do the work to make sure that our community is moving forward and we are getting our fair and just treatment.
That is awesome. Thank you once again for joining us, Pam.
Thank you.
All right. You guys have just witnessed another episode of 28 Days of Blackness. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you for tuning in.